Another NFL Sunday in the books, and it ends on a 31-0 Pittsburgh Steelers run. Who saw that coming as the Jets lose again? What's going on, everyone? My name is Adam Hoge from CHGO in Chicago. Got an awesome panel tonight on the ALL NFL Sunday Huddle. Super Bowl champion Todd Davis from DNVR joining the show tonight, and you've heard him before. He was running the show for me last week while I was in London. Johnny Venerable from PHNX joining us as well. None of our teams playing today, so we all got to watch a lot of football. Todd, did you enjoy the day?
Yeah, it was a good day. I had football on TV, football in person. Both of my boys play flag football here in Colorado. They play with the NFL flag team, but neither of them got put on the Broncos. One's a Commander, one's a 49er. I don't know how that happened, but it was good football all the way around.
I mean, you guys, it's funny when your teams are winning. Like, you can enjoy NFL Sundays more, I feel like when you're off. Like, the Bears have been playing well. The Broncos are one of the biggest surprises in the NFL, having won on Thursday. Like, there's very few feelings that are better than that as an NFL fan. And then when your team is not playing and you're watching everybody else either struggle or succeed, then you're just that much more, the anticipation for your game whenever it comes around is, hey, I think X team can turn it around. And that's how I felt today, not watching the Cardinals. I find myself talking myself into a 2-4 team, which is a very dangerous proposition. So I would much rather be kicking my feet up and be like, yeah, Cardinals are in great shape. Look at these scrub teams playing.
Yeah, well, the Broncos already got their win on Thursday to start the week off right for our all-city teams. Cardinals tomorrow night. We'll touch on that a little bit later on in the show. Big game for them. The Bears, of course, on a bye. The Cowboys on a bye. And the Eagles were the only ones of our 5 cities that had a game today. So we'll touch on what happened there because that was one of the top stories of the day. But we always start with recapping the Sunday night game. And guys, I don't know what to make with this Jets team, but, Aaron Rodgers seizing all the control, bringing in his guy Devontae Adams. A very winnable game, it seemed like, tonight against the Steelers, who made their own controversial decision at quarterback. But it went Russell Wilson's way. Let's start with the Steelers side of this since they won. Todd, I'm just curious what you thought about that move from Mike Tomlin. I mean, he's definitely one of those coaches out there in this league that's like, you give him the benefit of the doubt when he makes a move. I mean, he's got a great track record. He can obviously coach. But this one still seemed like, oh, man, you're 4-2 with Justin Fields, going to the old guy, Russell Wilson, and it paid off because Wilson – only 16 to 29, 264, but 2 touchdowns, and kept finding George Pickens in this game.
Yeah, you definitely want to question his decision before he makes it. But, once you see the outcome of the game, he made the right decision. I felt like the Steelers looked good on offense and defense. They were clicking on all cylinders. And it kind of made me think, did we lose something here in Broncos country when we let go of Russell Wilson? You start to forget, all the interceptions, all the sacks, and all the bad plays. You're like, Russell Wilson doesn't look too bad. So I think Mike Tomlin definitely made the right decision for that football team, and they played really well tonight.
Yeah, I did not like the move earlier in the week. I honestly thought that it was some kind of like a tactic because they wouldn't commit. And I'm like, well, there's no way they're gonna bench Justin Fields off of this start, especially off of a win last week. But they did. And I would imagine that there's some kind of unspoken agreement like between, Mike Tomlin and Russell Wilson that like once he felt ready to go, they were at least going to give him an opportunity and give him credit, man. Like I did not see that coming, especially after how the game started. He was throwing some balls into the ground and he looked immobile. I mean, he has the better part of the last 2 or 3 years, but he was efficient. I mean, no turnovers. That's the biggest key with him. 109 passer rating, only took 1 sack against this vaunted Jets defense. So I don't know. I for whatever reason, I feel like we haven't seen the last of Justin Fields, but it doesn't matter. Like, these two quarterbacks have shown to be 10 times better than what poor Mike Tomlin has been subjected to the last couple of years with Kenny Pickett and company. Like, it just shows you they need a ultimate game manager. And I do think Russell fits that bill. That's why they signed him before they traded for Justin Fields. But yeah, I mean, Mike Tomlin, he's like Jim Harbaugh. He's a winner. Winners win. I think this team has a ceiling unless they get home field advantage in the AFC or if they win the division. I think they have a very limited ceiling. But I mean, it's a great story. George Pickens is playing exceptionally well. He did everything that Garrett Wilson didn't do. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be easy for me to project them as a very rock solid playoff team this year.
Yeah, the politics in this whole thing are probably pretty interesting, and we obviously don't know what was promised, if anything. I think it is important to go back to March, though, and understand kind of how this all played out. I mean, remember, the Justin Fields thing came after Russell Wilson signed. It was a result of Kenny Pickett sort of suddenly falling out of favor and wanting a different situation, so they said fine, and then all of a sudden the Steelers became who we thought they were in the picture for Justin Fields to begin with, because obviously in Chicago, that's all we were talking about for a couple of months is where and when is this Justin Fields trade going to happen. And then all of a sudden it kind of came together late. So at that point, if you're Russell, you're probably going, all right, well, what's going on here? Because I just signed here and this is supposed to be my job. And then he gets hurt. So I think you're onto something there, Johnny, with like some type of handshake agreement. Whenever you're healthy, we'll roll with you. Now, obviously, it would have been different if Justin Fields was, lighting it up and putting up huge stats. That really wasn't what he was doing, though. And honestly, I'm not even sure Russell Wilson did that tonight. There was one of the worst throws I've ever seen in the first quarter of this game. And I think there were a couple third downs early in this game that Justin Fields probably picks up with his legs that Russell Wilson threw incomplete. So it took them a little while to get going. But this move still paid off in the end. And to your point, Johnny, they got 2 upgrades at the position. I don't know that either of these guys are the reasons why they're 5-2. They're obviously doing enough, though, that with good coaching and with a good roster around them, a good enough roster around them, they've managed to get to this point. So it's been pretty impressive. Let's move on over to the Jets, though, because I've been on this since the Aaron Rodgers trade happened. I just could not understand how this would work in New York. He made one Super Bowl, won that Super Bowl, but never got back in a functional organization that eventually couldn't wait to get rid of him. Going to the Jets, bringing all that drama to the Jets, I just did not see how this was going to work. And now they're 2-5. The coach is fired. Davante Adams is now there. The results are still the same. They gave up 31 unanswered. The defense isn't as good as it was last year. It's predictably kind of gone down the road I thought it was. Todd, do you think there's any way that this thing can be salvaged with Aaron Rodgers? It's not like he's playing poorly either. It's just he's not playing great though, and it's just kind of very Jetsy to me.
Yeah, it's not looking too good for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. It feels like they're trying to get things going, and Aaron Rodgers is very frustrated with the way that the receivers are playing and some of the options and routes that he's expecting his receivers to kind of already understand. Like you get press coverage, man-to-man, okay, you're supposed to run a comeback and you don't run a comeback. You run a go, but I throw the comeback. Like, we're off. It makes me look bad. It makes you look bad. And that's what he's running into a lot with those receivers. I think that's why he went and got Davante Adams, because I don't have to talk you through what I'm thinking. You know how I'm thinking, so it should look better. I think for the most part, he's, making some good throws, but what gets me is all the interceptions. I feel like Aaron Rodgers has way too many interceptions through this point of the season, and he's just not playing at the caliber he's ready to play at. But they do have some pieces coming back. Hassan Reddick, we know that he's coming back into the building. I think he'll be a big added piece for the team. They have a slew of talented wide receivers now, so hopefully they can get this thing going. I'm not totally out on Aaron Rodgers. I know he is about 50 years old, but I still think he has a little bit of good football left to play. So I want to see it come together, at least for a couple games.
I mean, isn't it ironic, gentlemen, that they fire Robert Saleh, who, I mean, he's not a great head coach. I think he had 3 straight seasons of 7-10. But one thing that you could hang your hat on, he's a great defensive coach. Like, I'm fearful now he's going to end up back in San Francisco after this year. But they fire Saleh, and last week, not a great performance against Buffalo. And then this week, they allow the Steelers with a washed-up Russell Wilson to put a season high on them from Pittsburgh side of things. Like, Pittsburgh scored a season high 37 points today. Like, I'm not saying that doesn't happen with Robert Saleh, but clearly, like, this team was supposed to be like, okay, we feel like with Robert Saleh, we know what our ceiling is without a quarterback. It's 7-10. And if we get Aaron Rodgers, we can probably flip that to 10-7, 11-6. I think their ceiling right now, based on how average Rodgers has been, when they thought that they thought they were getting Aaron Rodgers from like 5 to 7 years ago, which, I mean, Hoge, you saw him that last year in Green Bay. He was pretty average, especially down the stretch. You think back to that game against Detroit in the finale where Jared Goff came into Lambeau Field and outplayed Aaron Rodgers with the postseason on the line. Like, that's who they have now, except he tore his Achilles last year. I looked at their schedule. Like, I was ready to come on the show and be like, their season's over, and it probably is, but their schedule is a joke. I mean, they have the Patriots. They've still got my Cardinals. They've got the Colts, Seahawks, Dolphins, Jags, Rams. Like, they play the Bills again. So I'm not going to sit here and say, like, they have no shot to make the postseason, but, like, I think at best, like, you're looking at a 9-win team, and that's if they go – think about that. They have to go 7-3 now to make that happen. I think that's very difficult for an old team, an old roster. I don't know. Like, you have an interim coach. I think Rodgers and Adams are both free agents after this year. Like, this was kind of it. Like, you needed this game to give yourself some momentum. You've got Woody Johnson talking to the media this week, kind of, being a big-time fraud, a big-time clown, saying, like, we've only just begun. No, you just keep losing. I think they've lost, like, 4 straight in a row. Like, they're a non-factor. They're a complete non-factor. And if you're Pittsburgh, you've got to be laughing at them. You bought quarterbacks for pennies on the dollar after, the Jets are trading picks for Aaron Rodgers, and you're significantly better. It's pretty humorous watching from afar.
I want to shout. You guys mentioned the interceptions. I want to shout out though Beanie Bishop. This guy. I've seen those throws from Rodgers for years where he gets the right leverage on the corner in the middle of the field and throws it right behind him perfectly, and it goes for a big play, and the corner is just kind of looking around like, how did that just happen? And in this situation, Beanie Bishop somehow turns his body, picks him off, and then even the one that was obviously a Garrett Wilson drop, I still think him kind of getting in the way and just sort of being in the line of sight of that football, despite only being 5'9", was the reason why Garrett Wilson seemed surprised that ball got on him so fast. And obviously then opportunistic with the ball in the air. He grabs it, gets it all the way down to the 1. Shout out to Davante Adams, too, because the hustle to make the tackle at the 1-yard line, even though it ended up not preventing a touchdown, you still had the hustle there. I just... For an undrafted free agent guy that went to Western Kentucky, Minnesota, West Virginia, he's 5'9", 182 to get out there and pick off Aaron Rodgers twice tonight. Those were some big plays, and that the things that I just highlighted is very Jetsy. What Beanie Bishop's doing in that Pittsburgh Steelers defense is very Steelersy. I mean, that's just what they do. They find guys like that, they get the most out of them, and that shows you why the outcome was what it was tonight between the Steelers and the Jets. All right, we'll keep things rolling here on the Sunday Huddle. We always like to highlight our best and worst of the day. I don't want to go into too much depth on these yet because we got to talk about it a little bit more in depth later on in the show. But my best, I will start with, guys, just the NFC North in general. Even with the Bears on a bye, today you had a great game between the Lions and Vikings that allowed the Lions to pull even at the top of the division. And then the Packers hold and serve at home. They're all white unis with the white helmet that they debuted. I don't know why they didn't save that for a night game. It seems a little weird for a noon game. But regardless, big win over the Houston Texans. Obviously, the Texans have been playing really well. So to get that win at home, if you're the Bears, you wanted the Packers to lose, and then I guess it didn't really matter. Maybe you wanted the Lions and Vikings to tie, but regardless, this division continues to look really tough. Lions, Vikings at 5-1, Packers 5-2, Bears at 4-2 going into next week. So that was the best for me today. And then the worst, just want to make sure it gets mentioned at some point in the show, but the Falcons, just an absolute dud at home against the Seattle Seahawks. They seem to be moving in the right direction. That's a game you think they would win at home, especially. They lose by 20. I mean, just an absolute dud by the Falcons today. That was my worst. Todd, how about you?
So my best today, and I hate to do it, but I gotta say the Chiefs. I feel like when we won the Super Bowl, and when you win Super Bowls, you have to be not only a good team, but you have to be a healthy team. But now it feels like the Chiefs don't even have to be healthy. They could be missing players, missing star receivers, missing their star running back, and they still find a way to win these games, especially in a Super Bowl matchup, a game that everybody wanted to see. They found a way to get another win, 28-18 over the 49ers today. I'm just always like intrigued to see how this team is able to find wins. It's not easy to do. It doesn't matter who's on the field with Patrick Mahomes. He's able to find different receivers, tight ends. They can go 11 personnel, 12 personnel, 13 personnel. It doesn't really matter to them. And I think their defense is playing really well. Steve Spagnuolo has them playing at a very high level. So I think that, unfortunately, the Chiefs are my best for today. And my worst, the Browns. I feel like they can't get right. Their starting quarterback goes down, unfortunately tears his Achilles. Second quarterback comes in, throws 2 interceptions, then he gets injured. They're just a team that can't get right. You finally get your star running back. It's supposed to be a joyous day. It's supposed to be kind of the thing that changes your season around. Unfortunately, it didn't work out well for them, so I think the Browns have to be my worst. And I don't see it getting much better. They're 1-6 now. They're not going to win too many more games this year.
Yeah, I think if you're Cleveland, you got to hope. I saw some stuff online, like maybe they can recoup some of that money because of an injury settlement with Deshaun Watson. I don't have that source, but like $60 million was floating around there. I think today it was no pun intended, it was a breakup between the two parties. It felt like. I don't know how he comes back from that. My best today, and I'll give him credit, speaking of breakups, Cliff Kingsbury. I know it was against Carolina, but most of the game it was done with Marcus Mariota. I mean, they won 40-7 in one of the biggest non-competitive games we've seen, at least with Andy Dalton. Like, the Panthers have been like somewhat competitive. How about this stat, gentlemen? 4 out of the last 5 games, save for the Ravens game, Kingsbury and the Commanders have scored 34 or more points, beating the Bengals, Cardinals, Browns, and Panthers. Now, those aren't world beaters, but I mean, like, who's on this Commander offense? Like, outside of Terry McLaurin, who's a good player. I mean, it's like Brian Robinson and Zach Ertz and like Christian McCaffrey's cousin, Luke McCaffrey. Like, Cliff Kingsbury was not a great head coach here, although in hindsight, maybe he did a better job than we thought. And he was always nice to me. He was a super nice guy. I mean, he's going to get interviews. If anybody's sitting here thinking that Cliff Kingsbury is not going to be in the hiring cycle now, like how can he not? Now, he always used to kind of collapse toward the end of the year. Not kind of, he did. November, December, teams would figure him out. But give him credit, man. I mean, that 5-2. I mean, that's a postseason team right there. On the flip side, the worst, and this, it hits home for me, is the NFC West. For most of my adult life, I mean, dating back to like peak Russell Wilson, ironically tonight, San Francisco, and then the McVay Rams. For the better part of like 15 years, has been the best division, if not in the NFL, certainly in the NFC. And now you look up and the division is in complete shambles. Seattle's 4-3, but again, losers of 3 of their last 4. I watched the entire, like a sicko, Rams-Raider game, and the Rams did everything they could to give the Raiders that game. And the Raider team is just, they so talent deprived, like they had no shot to compete in that game. So the Rams beating the Raiders by 5. And then San Francisco, losing in really embarrassing fashion to Kansas City's Super Bowl champion, but like Kansas City is, I think, very vulnerable to what San Francisco should be. You see Brandon Ayuk potentially blow out his knee. Purdy looks average without an all-star team, 3 interceptions, including 1 in the red zone. And you think about it, I'll hit home here as a Cardinal fan, and it's like, it just kind of shows you when there are opportunities to take advantage of situations like this in the offseason where you're thinking to yourself, Should we be aggressive? Oh, you know what? The Niners are great and the Rams are good and the Seahawks are competitive. We're just going to wait this out and do a proper rebuild. And you're sitting here now. Yes, you're 2-4, but your 2 wins are against the NFC West, against the Niners and the LA Rams. It's incredibly frustrating following and covering this team, knowing that, yeah, the NFC is loaded, Hoge, especially the NFC North, but this division is very winnable. Like, the Niners are in shambles. The LA Rams are 2-4. They go on the road this week at Minnesota, and I think the Seahawks are pretty fraudulent. They gave up almost 200 yards rushing to Atlanta today. So I think if you're an Arizona Cardinal fan, it's like, why weren't we more aggressive? Should teams, general managers, seen this coming with the NFC West? It's bizarre, but again, it's taken about 15 years for the regression to take place in this division.
Well, I think another candidate for the worst, as I want to transition to one of the biggest performances of the day, and it involved the one all-city team that played today, the Philadelphia Eagles. But on the worst side of things, it's got to suck to be a New York Giant fan today, because not only did you fail to score a touchdown against your division rival, the Philadelphia Eagles, but your former running back went for 176 on the ground, averaging over 10 yards per carry on just 17 rushes, scoring a touchdown, a 55-yard run along the way. I mean, a pretty much worst-case scenario. At home, too, at MetLife Stadium, Barkley comes back, Saquon Barkley, and just feasts on his former team. And you know, the fans are all upset that he left, and yet if you watched Hard Knocks, I mean, they could have kept him. They could have upped it more. And the Eagles came in, they got him, and it's been a great signing at a controversial position to spend money at, and just really worst case scenario for the Giants today. Todd, do you have any takeaways just watching this game? It was one of the bigger stories of the day, Saquon going back to New York. And then somewhat predictably, I saw like a lot of, betting shows or little clips on Twitter this morning as I was watching that game in London, which feels like it was 3 weeks ago now, between the Pats and the Jags. But a lot of people were like, yeah, hit the over on like every Saquon Barkley prop bet because he's going to go off on the Giants today.
Yeah, I feel like, this is the games you dream of. Like, when you can go back and play your former team, like, you want to ball out. And, like, that's exactly what Saquon did today. You said that he had 176 yards on the ground. It really felt like whatever he wanted to do, he could do. They couldn't stop him. He was running downhill. He was running over guys, making them look silly. I think Hard Knocks, those quotes from their GM was just replaying my mind. Like, how silly could you have been to let this guy go? You paid the wrong guy, your quarterback. You should have kept your running back. You should have found a way to keep him on the team. He's a game changer. And I think, now more running backs will probably get paid because you understand how important they are to the team. But this is what you dream about at night, going back to play the teams that didn't want you or let you go or found some way not to draft you and just going out and balling out. That's exactly what he did today. And, I hope the Giants are like rewatching the film and hating every second of it.
And Johnny, real quick, I gotta always throw this in there because watching Hard Knocks, like they show the scene where John Mara, the owner, comes in and is like basically like, I don't want to lose this guy. It's going to be really hard for me to live with losing this guy. And you're the general manager, and like every franchise deals with this, conversations about ownership meddling and things like that. And that probably falls under the category of meddling. But it's still like, if my job might be on the line and the owner was in my office saying that, I think I might, take a little money from the budget to make sure I don't lose that guy for my own, job security.
Yeah, I have a theory that Mara put that in Hard Knocks specifically to show candidates that, hey, I don't meddle, guys. I didn't tell this team specifically to re-sign or not re-sign Saquon. Like, they made this decision. It's not on me. Come be my coach. Come be my GM. But in all seriousness, like, yeah, it's this team. And I like Brian Daboll. I think Brian Daboll's a good coach. What he did that first year with the Giants, which now feels like an outlier season. I mean, he at the very least, he's a high-end offensive coordinator. But real quick, on the subject of Saquon Barkley, like Saquon Barkley, I don't think we can understate. Like, he is saving currently Nick Sirianni's job. Like, Nick Sirianni should legitimately be like 2-4 or 1-5 to begin this year, if not for Saquon Barkley. I mean, Barkley averaged over 10 yards per carry today. So basically, they gave it to him 17 times. Every time he touched it, he basically got a first down. Whereas Jalen Hurts, who I thought was fine, was only asked to complete 10 completions today, which is interesting. Vic Fangio's defense was fantastic. And then what's really frustrating if you're a Giants fan, and this is something, I always bring it back to Arizona because it's the team I cover. Like, the Giants were competitive defensively in the first half. The Giants have maybe the most underrated unit in the NFL right now with their defensive line. And that's without Kayvon Thibodeau being healthy, the first rounder, I think, out of Oregon. Dexter Lawrence, if he's not the best D tackle in the NFL right now, it's like him and Chris Jones. He's on pace for a 13, 14 sack season from a defensive tackle, which is unheard of. He had 2 sacks today. The trade for Brian Burns that they made, which didn't make sense because this team is not close. Like, he's performing. They've got Azeez Ojulari, who's the brother of Arizona Cardinal player, B.J. Ojulari. He's a big-time player. And now, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you had 5 sacks today, like, doesn't register. Because I think we all know this because we've all experienced it in our respected markets. When your quarterback play is this bad, and Daniel Jones was that bad today, and they had to defer to Drew Lock, like, not only is the game over, your season's over, and maybe your tenure as the GM head coach combination. Like, you can't overcome bad quarterback play. And I know that's cliche, but like, there's a lot on the Giants that I like. They have a franchise left tackle. Malik Neighbors looks great. Yes, they don't have a big time running back, but like, their defense is good enough. But the gap between Daniel Jones and even average to, slightly above, like we see with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson tonight, is the Grand Canyon, and they will never be competitive. And like, the NFC East is down this year, and they're still terrible. They're 0-4 at home. I saw some ridiculous stat that like Daniel Jones hasn't thrown a touchdown pass at home in like 20 plus starts or something ridiculous, 600 snaps or something. So yeah, I mean, like, that's a team, you talk about selling. There's a bunch of teams that season basically ended today. Like, they're done. They're going to be shipping off veterans in the next couple of weeks. If you're looking for defensive line help, like, I would imagine Detroit's going to call them. But I mean, yeah, like, does Saquon make them more viable? I think you could make the argument. I mean, they're 2-5. I think he's worth at least a win for them, if not 2 wins. Like, they played the Commanders tough. Week 2 or week 3 did the Giants, only because of their defense. So maybe Saquon gives them that dub. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. The owner called it, and it's come crumbling down as a result. And they'll be in the head coach, GM, and quarterback market this offseason. That's the trifecta. They're going to try to emulate what the Commanders did this offseason.
Yeah, and they're just another one of these franchises that seems stuck with a big quarterback contract, and there's a lot of them out there right now, and it's kind of is probably a bigger discussion for a different day. But you got teams like the Giants, who it seemed like reluctantly paid Daniel Jones. You had the Dolphins paying Tua, despite the risk that all of us knew was still out there, right? That could happen on any given play for him. The Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence right now are extremely interesting. I think, that was maybe a little bit more warranted, and he's starting to play better the last 3 weeks. But, that was still starting to go down the road earlier this season of like, because you don't want to be stuck with these massive quarterback contracts like the Browns have right now with Deshaun Watson. And I wonder if we're going to see a shift here because, meanwhile, the Browns were a good example of this last year with Joe Flacco showing up and playing better. You got Sam Darnold in Minnesota right now. You got the Steelers. We just got done talking about them. They managed to pick up Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, and they're 5-2 right now. You got what Baker Mayfield's done in his resurgence in Tampa. You're getting examples around the league of teams being able to pick somebody else up, avoiding that massive, kind of being stuck with the big quarterback contract. And I don't know I'm just wondering if we'll start to see a shift away from what we seem to have there for a while, where teams were so scared to be in quarterback hell that they were willing to pay mediocre quarterbacks top dollar just because that's what you're supposed to do in this big quarterback bubble we live in?
I hope we do. I hate the quarterback market. Maybe it's because I'm a little bit jealous, but it's like the only position where you aren't paid based off your rank. Like if I'm a linebacker and I'm a top 10 linebacker, if I'm number 9 on that list, they're not going to pay me more than the 8 guy, but they have to pay me less. I mean, you have to pay me more than the 10th guy. Well, with quarterback, that doesn't matter. I feel like there should be no quarterback in the entire league that makes more money than Patrick Mahomes. He should be the top dog, and everybody should fall in line behind him. But it seems like they just keep paying these guys more and more money to have them on their roster, but it doesn't end up working out. And they're paying too much money for quarterbacks, and I feel like it needs to be, kind of reined in. They need to reestablish the pecking order and make it make sense. Otherwise, like you're saying, you're paying a lot of mediocre guys, and it doesn't amount to wins, and it doesn't amount to Super Bowls.
Yeah, I mean, when you're watching guys like Anthony Richardson today, I don't know if you guys caught any of that, and like he got a quarterback win, and I think he complete single digit throws. I mean, he was awful again today for Indianapolis, but like that's what duped the Giants a couple of years ago. Daniel Jones had a career year for him where he barely turned the ball over, but he had 16 touchdowns, and they felt like they were prisoners and had to pay him. But again, we've seen the alternative too. When you've got the opposite of that, it's hard to build a roster in a rebuild and then say, okay, at the end of our rebuild, we're going to get a guy, like a bridge guy to kind of help us and win 9 to 10 games. Like that typically doesn't happen. You have to inherit a roster where there's already a foundation built, and then you can, add some pieces and get a guy like a Flacco did, like the Browns did last year. The Browns had so many top picks for so long that Flacco really just picked up the baton and ran with it. But usually that's not how it works, right? So I do sympathize with these coaches and GMs because they feel like if we don't have the guy, we're going to get fired. But if we get somebody and we roll the dice and maybe they improve over the life of their contract, we're going to be employed for 10 years. But more often than not, if you're paying people before they've shown enough, there's a good chance that, number one, they don't ever reach the ceiling that you hope, and then potentially maybe, like we've seen with Deshaun Watson, they regress to egregious, unwatchable levels. So there are very few guys that, I mean, Jordan Love's an anomaly where they paid him and it feels like he's just now finding his footing and they slow played it right. Like most of the time, it does not look like that.
Before we move on, let's give our friends at PHLY some love here and go a little bit more in depth on the Eagles, who are 4-2. Obviously took care of business in impressive fashion today, 28-3. Johnny, the way you put that a few minutes ago, that Saquon Barkley is basically saving Nick Sirianni's job right now is very, very interesting because, I watched a decent portion of this game today, but if you just look at the box score, there's not enough, a lot of names jumping out of that box score that are really blowing you away offensively. Obviously, they have A.J. Brown too, but this really has kind of been, you wonder, where is this Eagles team right now? And had they not spent the money on Saquon Barkley? Todd, I'm wondering, you got the Commanders who have, caught fire. I don't know if people are completely believing in them, but this NFC East does seem to be down. Is this still the Eagles' division to win right now in your eyes?
I'm not sure. It kind of feels like they're kind of leading up into have another year like they did last year. But they looked really solid early in the season, and then they just fell apart. It feels like if anything happens to Saquon Barkley, knock on wood, and nothing does, I feels like their season is completely over. They did get A.J. Brown back, a week ago, and he's been playing well, but it just doesn't feel like they are a top tier team like they were a few years ago when they went to the Super Bowl. And I'm a believer in this Washington Commanders team. I know Jayden Daniels, he got hurt today, and so he may be out for a little bit. It's really tough if he is hurt because he was playing of course, the Rookie of the Year, but also like an MVP, putting up really good numbers as a young quarterback and really finding his footing. As a Broncos fan, we see Bo Nix, finding his footing, but it feels like Jayden Daniels is already, leaps and bounds above everybody else. So I don't think it's the Eagles division. I think they're going to have to work hard, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen because it doesn't feel like the Eagles of the past or dominant Eagles play. It feels like, they're getting by, getting wins, but it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I I think losing both coordinators, Steichen and Gannon, I'm not sure they'll ever recover from that. And again, like Fangio did a fine job today, and even last week. But Sirianni, man, is a lightning rod. He is not well liked by their fan base, by that media market. It feels like they like a couple of the other teams that we talked about today, Pittsburgh included. Like I think they have a very limited ceiling. And that has nothing to do with their personnel. I think their personnel is outstanding. Like Jalen Carter, 2 sacks today. They've got big-time playmakers, obviously Barkley, but the 2 wide receivers in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. I'm a huge believer in Jalen Hurts. Like Nakobe Dean, some of these Georgia players are starting to play well. Nolan Smith had a sack today. Like the talent's not a problem. Like Howie Roseman, no matter what you think of him, like can evaluate. Sirianni, like it's always a question of like, what do you do? Like are you a motivator? Are you like a John Harbaugh type? Because I just feel like sometimes, most of the time, actually, like he's in a little bit over his head and can borderline like act unprofessional. Like he was like taunting the fans last week. Like very thankful for him. Number one, he's got Saquon Barkley. Number two, that he gets to play teams like the Giants twice a year. They've lived a very charmed life with their schedule. They played a floundering New Orleans team last week. So I think when the schedule picks up, like it'll be interesting. Cliff Kingsbury, we talked about, I know he's not the head coach, but I've just seen it firsthand. Like he's got a lot to prove as seasons end. Same with Sirianni, like how the Eagles finished last year. They have to be in a position to win the division, I think, to be able to keep his job in Philadelphia. You can't be losing the division, in my opinion. And I do think I would take the Commanders today over them. I just don't like their vibe or their mojo. But if they lose that division to Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury and a rookie quarterback over what they've built, he'll lose his job. He's not going to stay employed.
Well, let's hold the NFC North talk here for a second, then dive into the Commanders. That probably makes a little bit more sense to stay in the East right now. It was interesting today because Jayden Daniels gets hurt early on, like right at the end of their first offensive drive. Now, they had already scored a defensive touchdown to go up 7-0. They get the field goal, and it seemingly happened right in there, maybe the play right before the field goal, where he goes out with a rib injury. And then, Johnny, your guy, Cliff Kingsbury, dials up Marcus Mariota from the dead. And he has a day, 18-23, 205, and 2 touchdowns. I mean, Mariota, the last time we saw him was on that quarterback show, basically quitting on the Falcons, it seemed like. So that was really, if you want to put another feather in the cap of what Cliff Kingsbury's done so far this season, it was what we saw today. Now, granted, it came against the Panthers. And the Panthers, if you're not betting against the Panthers every single week, I don't know what you're doing. It's free money. They're horrible. And, they got to be the worst team in the league right now. I still thought it was impressive what they did with Mariota today, though, Johnny.
I think Cliff Kingsbury, like, give him his flowers. He's going to be in this head coaching cycle. Can he just be a really great offensive coordinator like that? Is that such a bad thing? Like, I don't think he's meant to be an NFL head coach because the command that you have to have over your 53-man roster, like the Cardinals never improved under Cliff. But I think as an offensive coordinator, for him to be able to just focus on that one thing that clearly he's good at, he's passionate about, and he's good at elevating quarterbacks. Like the Mariota splurge today, very similar to, he won games in peak NFC West with Colt McCoy when Kyler missed a month of play. He went on the road with Colt McCoy and beat, Pete Carroll and Kyle Shanahan back-to-back weeks with Colt McCoy. Like, so he has this in his resume. And you saw Mariota look very comfortable in this offense. So I will give him immense credit. I think Washington, again, like whether it's smoke and mirrors right now, Zach Ertz is catching touchdowns. They ran for 214 yards and almost 6 yards per carry. And like, I like Brian Robinson, but that is impressive. So the league will continue to get more tape on what they're doing. I think teams will adjust as the weather turns a little bit. But like it's been a slam dunk hire. I rolled my eyes like a lot of people when he got hired back in the NFL. I thought, haven't we seen this play out? Didn't the league figure him out? And maybe it's something as simple as he's just not meant to be a head coach. Like, and that may not reign true like 18, 24 months from now. Maybe he gets another job and does great. I always root for people to succeed. I have no ill will against Cliff Kingsbury, but like I've seen it play out before. The Cardinals were 7-0 with Cliff Kingsbury, and then collapsed to the point where they won 11 games and blew the division in the final week of the regular season. They were 6-3 and finished 8-8. Like, so this is his time to shine. September and October is Cliff Kingsbury's time. November, December, January, it's a different ball game. He got fired from Texas Tech toward the back half of seasons just like this. So we'll wait and see.
Yeah, I think I'd need to see more from Marcus Mariota, and I don't know if we will. Like, I think we've seen older quarterbacks step in and give you a game. We've seen Joe Flacco come and do it last year. I think Russell Wilson did it tonight. I don't know if he can continue to be good and polished to not turn the ball over, but I think they need Jayden Daniels back as quick as possible, because when you do get figured out, when you do have a defensive coordinator that knows exactly what you want to do, there's sometimes where you have X factors where even if you have a guy to tackle me, he can't bring me down. So I'm going to make a play. I'm going to make something happen. I think that's where Jayden Daniels is right now. He's going to be helpful for that offense. If they do start to sputter and they start to lose their, their shine or their glitz or their glamour, he'll be able to make plays and make things happen.
Yeah, well, pretty awesome quarterback matchup coming next week, assuming Jayden Daniels can get back. I would have to think that unless there's, and I think the early reports or the x-rays on those ribs were negative, so maybe it's just that rib cartilage issue that pops up sometimes, which is still painful, but you got to think he's going to get out there for this game against the Bears next week. It's the late afternoon window. It got flexed into that spot with the number 1 and number 2 picks going head to head. And I think, speaking of tests for Cliff Kingsbury, this will be arguably the biggest test that he's had in this situation, because the Bears defense, say what you want about Matt Eberflus as a head coach, his defense is playing really, really well. They take the ball away. And I think the Bears defense in this matchup is considerably better than what the Commanders defense is. So this is going to be, I think, one of those games as we go into week 8, guys, where you talk about teams adjusting and really kind of starting to show in late October who they really are. I think we're going to learn about both the Commanders and the Bears as we kind of transition this conversation to the NFC North. We're going to learn a lot about both of these teams in what appears to be a pretty fun matchup.
Yeah, this is the game that. Oh.
Go ahead, man.
No, I feel like this is the game that everybody wants to see. I think the first rookie quarterback matchup was against Bo Nix and Spencer Rattler. I don't think that's the game that anybody wanted to pay for and see. But you want to see the big dogs play, and these are two guys that are highly touted coming out of college. And for me, they were the best 2 quarterbacks in this last draft. So I'm excited to see them go head to head if Jayden Daniels can get back and be healthy. I think it's 2 good teams, and the teams just keep getting better. There's a lot of talent on both rosters, so it's a highly anticipated game, and we definitely want to see Jayden Daniels back healthy.
Agreed. I'm with Todd. I think we would feel robbed if Jayden didn't play. I do think Chicago has a very distinct advantage, even though this game is in Washington. Like, I will give Dan Quinn an immense amount of credit. Like, I don't know how Washington's defense is doing this, whereas like with Eberflus, like there's a who's who Hoge of really good defensive players Chicago has had. They've invested in guys like Montez Sweat. Their front seven's been fantastic. So like I think Caleb Williams can have success against this Commanders secondary. Like, go back and look at some of these earlier games against decent quarterbacks. Like, they've had their way. Their secondary is not good. And then on the flip side, like, there hasn't been a team yet, which is crazy to say, outside of Tampa week 1. I mean, even the Ravens, like, no one has really contained Jayden Daniels. Like, Jayden Daniels against Baltimore last week, like, go look at his numbers. I mean, super efficient, 110 quarterback rating. Like, can Eberflus defense do that? I think so. I think Eberflus against a rookie quarterback, that's probably a matchup I would sign up for. But the teams are very similar. And defensive head coaches, the offensive coordinators, at least from my perspective, that, have gotten a lot of flack. And yeah, I'm with Todd. Like, these are easily the best 2 rookie quarterbacks, leaps and bounds. We heard that all throughout draft season. Like, when it became clear, like, Jayden Daniels not only was declaring the momentum he had after winning the Heisman Trophy, and then what Caleb did in the Pac-12, like, there was questions about could Drake May fall and could JJ McCarthy leapfrog Drake May. So this matchup deserves a primetime spot. I'm looking forward to watching it.
Yeah, and by the way, I was just looking ahead at what the line is already for next week. It's off the board because of Jayden Daniels' injury, but the look-ahead line had Washington favored by 1.5 actually in this game. So we'll see where that goes. But where my head's at, guys, a week away from this game, that especially coming off the Bears' big win in London, this fan base could not be crazier. I mean, it's been a long time waiting for a quarterback like Caleb Williams to show up, and this will be there's been a lot of, as you guys know, a lot of Caleb versus Jayden talk here early on in the season, especially the first probably 10 quarters of Caleb's season got off to kind of a rocky start, and everything since then has been much, much better. So this is one of those games where the anxiety will be high. And, you know, I do like the matchup, though, as we look at this a week in advance. And if I had to say, I would predict Jayden Daniels plays in this game, and I would pick the Bears to win, which should be a really fun game. But that's just kind of where my head's at right now. Let's go to the rest of this NFC North, the teams that did play today. I'm just curious from you guys, obviously being in Chicago, the early window today, I was zoomed in on those two games. You had the Packers playing the Texans, and then you had the Lions playing the Vikings. I'm curious from your guys' perspective, being farther out west, just how you see this NFC North shaping up. I still think the Lions are the best team. Do you guys agree with me on that one? Or do you feel like this Vikings team's for real, or that the Packers are still kind of sneaky? Because with how young their roster is, it is actually impressive the start that they're off to.
Yeah, so the Lions, I think, are definitely the best team in the division. They've been playing at a high level, and sometimes it takes time to really be successful. I think both these teams, the Vikings and the Packers, are also good, but I think they're younger in a lot of ways, and then also haven't played together and haven't reached the same, I guess, mountaintops that the Lions have. Like, you got to go to some championship games before you reach the Super Bowl, and I think that both these teams, the Vikings, nobody expected them to do this. I know they're like surprising everybody. Sam Darnold's playing really well. He's able to find his top tier receivers, but I don't think this is a unit that anybody expected to go to the postseason and really make a push like we do with the Lions. And the Lions have a lot of the same guys they had last year. They've added some good receivers. I think Tim Patrick from the Broncos is playing really well over there. Montgomery got hurt for a little bit, had a fumble today, uncharacteristic of him, but they have two talented running backs, Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. They have a stocked offensive line. Their tight end is great. Their defense is good. Lost Aiden Hutchinson, which is a tough for the season. But I think all around, the Lions are the best team in that division, and they'll find a way to end up winning the division, even though the Vikings got the best of them today.
Yeah, I think the Lions are in their Super Bowl window, and I think they're the best team in the NFC and maybe the best team in the NFL. And that's even with losing Aiden Hutchinson. I got to ask, earlier today, by who are the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL right now? And I think you put the big 3 in the AFC by pure respect: Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar, right? Everybody always includes those 3, and rightfully so. And then it's who would you put in that group then outside of those 3? I think you got to put Jared Goff in that conversation right now. Just what he's able to do week in and week out. They're putting up massive numbers, and their defense can be a little bit hit and miss. The offense typically shows up. Last 3 weeks, 42 points, 47 points, 31 points today. And Hoge, you and I were talking that game not as close as the final score indicated. Vikings got some charmed life luck, I think, they've gotten all year. I think the Lions make a couple moves ahead of the deadline. This is an all-in season for them, rightfully so. That team's never won anything. I think they desperately need home field advantage in Detroit. And so obviously that's going to be tough playing in this division. But I do think the Vikings take a step back, as crazy as it sounds, because how they started. If you told me at the end of the year, the Vikings finished last in the NFC North, I would 100% buy that. I just feel like Darnold has not played well. He did not play well against the Jets. They could have lost to the Packers. Like I do feel like, looking ahead, I know they've got some easier games coming up, the Jags and the Colts and the Titans, but to me, like I feel like we're seeing some of those inconsistencies creep in. The Packers, to me, are the ultimate wild card because they have, I think, so many of those similarities from that first kind of Aaron Rodgers championship run where they went on the road and they won all those playoff games, and they almost did last year, right? What bothers me about Jordan Love is he just throws too many interceptions. Like the Cardinals couldn't get after him because their pass rush is legitimately the worst in the NFL. But if you've got a pass rush, Jordan Love, his numbers drop significantly. Like he cannot beat the blitz. He cannot beat significant pressure in his face. He's got 15 touchdowns this year, but he's almost got double-digit interceptions at the halfway point. So I think he can keep teams in games. Like go back and look at a lot of their games this year. Like they'll jump out to big leads and Jordan makes a couple mistakes. Like that will be their Achilles heel. But like unequivocally, it's the best division in the NFL. I think 3 playoff teams are going to come from this division. So I think I feel very confident the Packers and the Lions will make the playoffs. So the Bears and the Vikings, I think, will be vying for that last spot.
Yeah, and honestly, if they keep winning outside of the division, there's a world in which all 4 teams could get in the playoffs. As you know, I don't think that's ever happened before, but this division also right now has the most wins. They had the most wins through week 6 in NFL history, or at least since, as a division, since they went to the 4-team divisional format back in 2002. And now they have the most through week 7, even though the Bears didn't even play today. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. But when you have the Packers beating the Texans, and then if the Bears can beat the Commanders, like as long as these teams keep winning outside the division, they might beat up on each other like the Lions and Vikings had to do today, but it's still possible that they all make it in, which would be very intriguing. I was impressed with the Lions win today because that is not an easy place to play in Minnesota. Todd, I know you were Viking. Like that building is loud. I've been in it many times. I love that stadium. And when you get a big play like they got against a running back like David Montgomery, who rarely puts the ball on the ground, return it for a touchdown, that game felt like it was over at that time. Yeah. And all of a sudden the momentum switched on that play. That one could have gotten out of hand. And all of a sudden you have the Vikings sneak out a win on their home turf, even though they weren't the better team. Really good teams like that buckle down and pull and do what the Lions did. They needed a drive. They needed their offense to move the ball downfield, have the kicker kick the game-winning field goal. I was impressed by how they survived what it transpired late in that game when it seemed like they were maybe going to give it away, Todd.
For sure. And that's what great teams do. People always love to talk about Peyton Manning and how bad he was when we won the Super Bowl. But the great thing about Peyton is he did exactly what we needed him to do when we needed it. Like if it was late in the fourth quarter, we get a turnover, like he's going to march down and score, even if he hadn't scored the entire day. Like he just did exactly what we needed when we needed it to do. So I think that this team is built to do something great. But like you said, this division is tough. And I think you have 2 options when your division is this good. You guys are either going to beat up on each other and be so battle tested that whoever comes out the division is going to win the Super Bowl, or you're going to play each other so tough and so hard, you're going to be too damaged to make a big playoff run, and you guys are going to just fall short early in the playoffs.
Yeah, the foundation of this Lions team, I not stealing Jared Goff, but basically like taking Jared Goff off the Rams' hands, and then all those first-round picks blossoming. Like they're going to be in a position here. I mentioned it earlier, like within the next 10 days, like I wouldn't be surprised if they made like multiple trades. Their offense feels pretty set to me, but they know the importance of defensive line pressure. It prevented them from getting to the Super Bowl last year. Losing Hutchinson is backbreaking, but again, like the Giants, the Browns, these teams that are completely dead and buried, like they're going to come calling with premium picks on disposal, and they should. Like that's a town that's starved for a winner. They deserve it. This is clearly as close as they've ever been. I think last year they were probably a year ahead. I thought the Niners were the best team last year, and having watched football 7 weeks this season thus far, like I know Kansas City's undefeated, but the way the Lions are winning games, it's very difficult to not say that from a collection of talent, they don't have the best 53-man roster right now.
Well, you know what though? That's a good way to think about this. The Chiefs barometer, right? Look at this division right now. Which of these 4 teams would you say could realistically knock off Kansas City in a playoff game? I think as good as these teams are, I think the Lions would be the only team I would say could realistically match up with the Chiefs in a Super Bowl and win the game. I don't know that the Packers could do it. I don't think this Vikings team can do it. And as good as the Bears seem to be trending up, I don't think they're going to get there this year. Maybe next year's when they enter that type of window. So that's where this Lions team is. And I think that's why you got to still say they're the favorite, because they're the one team that I could actually envision in a Super Bowl pulling a win off over the Chiefs. So, all right, guys. Hey, that's good conversation on the NFC North. I want to make sure you guys, before we get out of here, have an opportunity to hit on your 2 teams. And Johnny, we'll start with you because the Cards play tomorrow night. And you were talking early on in the show about how this NFC West is not really what everyone maybe thought it was going to be, especially with the 49ers struggling the way they are. I don't know, how realistically you look at it. It's like some type of Cardinals run coming out of this, but the door is cracked open. Is this game against the Chargers tomorrow night considered a must win?
It is. It's 100% a must win for a lot of different reasons. I do want to preface this by saying, like, as down as I am on the Cardinals, they have played the hardest schedule in the NFL thus far. Like, that's not an opinion. That's a fact. PFF referenced it. They played 5 of their 6 games have been against playoff teams from last year. And the only team that they've lost to thus far that doesn't have real playoff aspirations, or that they played, are the LA Rams. They played the Bills, Lions, Commanders, Niners, and Packers. Now they play the Chargers. Like, there is no Tennessee or Jacksonville mixed in there. This is a must win for a lot of different reasons. Yes, it's got a barometer on viability for the rest of this year, but the Los Angeles Chargers were where the Cardinals were to some extent last year. The Chargers are in year 1 of a rebuild under Jim Harbaugh, but we have different expectations because it's Jim Harbaugh, and yes, they've got Herbert, and the Cardinals were missing Kyler Murray, but the Cardinals have an 18-month head start. Like, they got started last year. They've had 2 off seasons. Hoge, you've experienced this in Chicago. When you play these teams that just started on their rebuild, like a Commanders, and your team has been rebuilding for 2+ years, and they've had the cap space and they've had the draft picks, and you can't beat these teams that just started and they're ahead of schedule, there's very few things that get people riled up more than that. Like, I can grade on a curve when you face the Detroits, the elites, right? Obviously. But in a game like this, to really reintroduce Kyler Murray to a national stage, post Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim, with Jonathan Gannon now, who's taken his own, scope of criticism, which I think has not been, rightfully deserved. You're playing a Charger team that doesn't travel well. That preseason, a lot of people expect you to win this game. Suddenly, you look up and it's basically a pick 'em. I think the line started about -2.5 for LA. Cardinals are basically a point and a half underdog now. Chargers are missing Joey Bosa, Quentin Johnson, their top receiver. The roster is not great. They really haven't beaten anybody. They're a nice story, but they've beaten the Broncos, the Panthers, and the Raiders. And they lost to the Steelers and the Chiefs, right? If you're the Arizona Cardinals, you have to win this game if you want to be taken seriously. If you lose this game and you fall to 2-5 with Kyler Murray and Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Budda Baker, and all the good mojo that you seemingly built up this offseason, like, we're going to start talking about, like, is this the right regime? You're 2-5. Like, you won 4 games last year. The year before that, you won 4 games. I get it was under a different regime. So I picked them to win, gentlemen, on our Friday preview show. I don't feel good about that at all. I think Jim Harbaugh is an elite head coach. I think that they do everything the Cardinals wish they could do well, run the football, play great defense. If the Cardinals want to win this game, and I tweeted this out, like, Kyler Murray has to be undeniable. Marvin Harrison Jr., who was cleared from concussion protocol, has to take this game over. That's the only way you're beating this Charger team. Like, I use this comp, and it's not apples to oranges, but I'll end on this. I was at the Fiesta Bowl a couple years ago when TCU beat that great Michigan team, right, that we all thought was national championship bound when they lost in the semifinal. they did so with, I think, lesser talent because coincidentally, Quentin Johnston took over that game and had 150, 200 yards, and they lost through the air. Like, that's how you beat the Charger team. If you want to play the trenches against the Chargers, if you're the Arizona Cardinals, you will lose this game.
Probably a good opportunity for me to get a little plug in too, because depending on what happens here with the Cardinals the next couple weeks, and if the Bears can handle things against the Commanders, got a little CHGO PHNX battle coming up in a couple weeks down in the desert, and that comes with a golf outing. The Desert Duel is happening that Saturday morning of that weekend too, and so we got a lot of people from Chicago watching right now, Bears fans, Cardinals fans watching this show right now. Make sure you check out True Fan Travel because all of those events that are going to be happening that weekend when Chicago invades Arizona, on top of all, the permanent invasion that already exists there, Johnny, as you know.
Can I just make a quick point? They are the highest priced tickets of the year for Cardinal home games, easily. If with our ticket provider that we use, Game Time, like they are easily the highest. I've got family coming into town from Illinois, like triple the prices. So yeah, you're speaking to the choir, my friend.
Well, it's going to be a super fun weekend. We're going to be down there the entire weekend. And if you guys saw anything of what we did in London, this will be admittedly like London light because it's a little shorter trip. But I love going to Phoenix, and we're going to have meet and greets and events. And obviously, if you want to play some golf, we got a great golf outing happening that Saturday too. So go to truefantravel.com for all the info on that. And plus a big tailgate happening before the game too, which tickets are still available. I think the only thing that's been sold out were the actual game tickets that were available. To Johnny's point, the tickets are hard to come by right now. All right, Todd, your Denver Broncos. I just want to give you an advance congratulations on improving to 5-3. Yes, I know they're only 4-3, but you get the Carolina Panthers coming next week. So congrats on getting to 5-3. That was a pretty impressive homecoming for Sean Payton to go back to New Orleans and win the way they did. Yes, Spencer Rattler playing, but still 33-10. Where are you guys at with this Broncos team right now? I mean, are you guys taking them seriously as contenders this year to make a run in the playoffs?
This Broncos team was just surprising a lot of people, but, I was in training camp with the Denver Broncos as a coach, and I know their early season projection was for them to win 5.5 games. And I've heard Sean say many times, when in the world have I ever won 5.5 games? So he knew, and I felt like the rest of the team knew that they were going to be a lot better than 5.5 games. They've already won 4, and they're going to get their 5th this weekend, like you said. Last weekend, they completely dismantled a Saints team that wasn't fully healthy, but it was great to see as a Broncos fan because those exact games were games that we would win by 3 points or 7 points. Like we would play like the really easy teams, the trash teams, and we play them too close. But so it was great to see in a game that you should win, they just completely blew them out the water. So hopefully I'm going to see the same Denver Broncos that I saw last Thursday this Sunday. They're going to completely dismantle this Panthers team, and I think Bo Nix is playing well. The running game has started to really pick up. They had over 200 yards rushing, which was the most from the Broncos since 2013. So they're doing a really good job finding their identity on the ground. Bo Nix, he's coming along. He missed a couple passes, in that game on Thursday, but we're finally seeing guys wide open in Sean Payton's offense. And that's what we want to see. And I think Bo over time will continue to hit those guys. So if you're a Broncos fan, you need to be betting on the Broncos to continue to win games. And I'm not saying they're going to win a Super Bowl this year, but they should be pretty strong and be a lot better than what people thought starting the season.
Well, and definitely bet them next week, because if you didn't hear my advice early on in the show, I don't care what the spread is, go against the Panthers because they're just that bad. And that game is in Denver before back-to-back road trips to Baltimore and Kansas City, which will be obviously be very, very tough test. But if they're able to pull out even one of those 2 road games after the Panthers, then that's kind of their moment. As we were talking about late October, early November. middle of the season where you can kind of have those statement games, or like the league starts to separate itself a little bit. And I think we'll know a little bit more about the Broncos too in the next couple of weeks, sort of, like the Bears and the run that they've been on recently. How realistic of contenders, or as Johnny likes to say, viable contenders, are these teams this year. And I think we'll learn a lot about most of these teams in the next few weeks. Guys, it was a lot of fun. Love doing this on Sunday nights. Todd, it was great having you as part of the panel for the first time this season as well. And, for all three of us to just have a nice Sunday, to enjoy some football. Todd's got some flag football going on. I don't know how you got to fix that with the teams. Like your guys got to be on the Broncos.
Absolutely. I saw the Broncos head of PR there. And, of course, his son got on the Broncos team, but mine didn't. I'm not calling the right people.
Oh, man. Was that Patrick?
Yeah.
Come
Patrick's
on, man.
Son. We play them next week, so, hopefully I get a win over the Broncos.
Oh, that'll be a big one. That's the biggest game of the week next week. That's the one right there.
Sure.
All right, guys. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate all the fans watching as well. We got great content across the board, whether it's nationally with All City. We appreciate everybody hitting the subscribe button, the like button, helping grow this Sunday night show that we've been doing to kind of feature all of our awesome talent. Because if you haven't been paying attention, the group of talent that we have put together to cover all 5 of the All-City markets, especially when it comes to NFL. It's been great, and the show's been showcasing it all season. So make sure you go support all these guys. Follow them on Twitter. And as I start to lose my voice late on a Sunday night, because it's been that time. I think I'm still recovering from London, to be honest with you. It's been that was just a wild week. So we'll continue to rest up with what's left of this bye week for the Bears and get ready to go right back at it, because the work never stops. For Todd Davis, Johnny Venerable, I'm Adam Hoge. Talk to you next week.
We all silly like the mayor.